Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. In this video, we will start with absolute basics of Python. So just to how do we install Python, how do we install an IDE or the integrated development environment where we write our programs, and also just how do we set up a conda environment during the start of the project, how do we make a GitHub repository so that we can follow our code, so we can keep a track of our code as we build up our project. So all of these basics thing we'll get started with it, and my plan for this series or for this series of video is that we start with the absolute basics and then we keep on building up slowly, and then later we'll go towards the more higher concepts in Python. So why to learn Python? So my personal story was when I started to do my PhD at the Max Planck Institute in Germany, I saw everyone in my lab was using Python or was learning Python to analyze all the scientific data that we were recording, and just to set up the whole experiment pipeline, that how do we play a certain stimuli, how do we record the experiment and then later analyze those data and then make figures out of it so that later we can publish it in a scientific paper. So I started to learn during that time. So you might be in a similar situation or a different situation. So you may be in a project where you are getting different kinds of data and you need to make sense out of those data. You need to analyze them, generate some insights from that, generate some figures from that, right? Or or you may be someone who are just interested in learning a new programming language. So whoever it is, like whatever your requirement is, so this video will be helpful for you. And it's a very simple programming language, so it won't be too much of a difficulty if you want to learn it. Also, apart from this, there is a huge Python community. So what that does is that a lot of code has already been written down by someone else, right? So we need to just import those codes and we can use those libraries or those packages for our use. So this is one very important benefit of using Python, is that there are huge libraries that are already available and we can just use it for our case. And one more suggestion would be that as we go along these videos, please do it yourself as well. So Python is not something that you just listen and then you learn. You have to do it in order to learn it. So it's just like any other sport. So if you want to learn any sports, just looking at watching videos won't help you. You need to get to the ground and you need to play. So just similar to that with Python as well, you need to have your laptop or computer with you and you need to start coding in order to learn it. So the first thing, what my suggestion would be is that as you watch this video, have your laptop or computer with you, and as we do different things, you just follow along and keep doing those things, right? So keep writing those codes. So the first thing is to install Python. So how do we do that? So there are multiple ways to do this. So my suggestion would be, so first what you can do is that we can just directly download Python, right? So download Python, if you just Google it, then you will be taken to the main Python website, right? So python.org, and you can just download it, right? So I have Mac OS, and also whatever I will show you today, so mostly it will be in a Mac operating system because I am using a Mac operating system, but also for Windows or any other operating system, the process should be similar. So you just download Python, right? And when you have it downloaded, then you just run it, right? So it's quite a straightforward process. So continue, agree, right? And install, right? So since I have already installed Python in my computer, so I'm not going to install it, but this is how you can install Python if you don't already have it. So this is one thing, right? The other suggestion from my side would be to download either a Miniconda or Anaconda, right? So what Anaconda does is that it downloads a lot of things for you, right? And then you can just straight away use it. But the main thing which I want you to download Conda is to later we will create a conda environment. So whenever you start a project, so in Python, we will be using different packages, right? So let's say later we'll download NumPy or Pandas or Matplotlib and so on. So we'll be downloading many different packages and different version of it. So if you are doing all of this thing inside a particular environment, then it is very easy to manage it, right? So also later, so sometimes what happens is that, so in the beginning I didn't have this idea, so I didn't used to do it. But what happens is that, let's say you upgrade your Python or you upgrade some of your packages and suddenly your code stops running. So that is a problem, right? So what you do is that whatever packages you install, whatever you do it inside a particular environment, right? So that you have only those packages installed in that particular environment. So if you are just very new to Python, you can ignore whatever I am saying right now, but this will, as you go more deeper into Python and you start writing more and more codes, the importance of environment, setting up an environment you'll get more familiar with it. And also, for example, if you download someone else's code, right? So let's say you are downloading some code from GitHub repo. So there you see requirements.txt. So that requirements.txt is all of the packages that you need in order to run those code, right? So you just can do pip install requirements.txt. So in a similar manner, when you have your project ready, then you can just build those requirements.txt from your environment of all the packages that you need to run that particular code. Okay, so if you didn't understand all of this, no problem. You will get to know the use of an environment maybe later, like as you write more and more code. So what I would suggest you is that, so either you can download Miniconda. Okay, so if you just write download Miniconda, then you can just find whichever is your particular system, right? And then you can download that particular version for you. Okay, so either you can do this, or what you can do is, if you are absolutely new and you don't want to get into all of this Miniconda thing, what you can do is that you can download the full version of Anaconda, right? So anaconda.com/download, or if you just go to Anaconda, right? So, you know, you can just download it here. And since I have a Mac system, so it is showing here as Mac, so I will download this. But if you are on any Windows or Linux or whatever, so you download that particular version, right? So this Anaconda, what it will do, so I'm doing it for M1 or M2 chip. So this, what this will do is that it will give you conda, right? And it will install a lot of things for you, right? So I will not be using all of those things, but mostly I am downloading it for conda environment, right? So to set up the conda environment. So yeah, again, so just to show you here, so just keep continuing, continue, agree, and then install, right? So since I've already installed, so I'm not going to do it again, but you can just install it here. So this is Anaconda, right? And then you'll get a lot of different things from this, but I'll just install it for now. And now the next thing to decide is that once you have downloaded Python, you have downloaded conda, right? Then the next thing to think about is that what IDE are you going to use? By IDE, I mean integrated development environment. So it's like a place where you manage all of your codes, where you build your project, right? So where you write all of your codes and so on. So for that, my suggestion would be to use Visual Studio Code. So there are many different IDEs that you can use, but the one which I have been using lately, and also I like it the most, so I would suggest to download Visual Studio Code. Okay, so download Visual Studio Code, right? And yeah, so you just go here, and yeah, so I have the Mac version, so I will download the Mac version, and whatever version you have, so you can just download it, right? So let me just show you. So yeah, so here it is, and also this I have already downloaded it, so I'll not go through the whole process, but I'm just showing you how to do the basics, right? So you already have downloaded, so you have the Visual Studio Code here. Okay, so now we can get started with it. So the first thing is, so wherever you want to get your project started, right? So also we can do one more thing before this. So what I do is that so I have all the things set up now, right? So I have Python, I have Anaconda, I have Visual Studio Code, and in a moment all of this will come together. But one more thing that I like to do is to go to my GitHub page, set up a repository, clone it locally, right, and then start building up things on that. So I will just do that. So let me just go to my GitHub, right? So I'll just go to my GitHub, right? So let me just make a new repository, right? So repository, let's say I call it as Python tutorials. Okay, so description. So this repo will be used to store all the codes, all the code I will be used to store all the code for the YouTube Python videos that I make. Okay, so you can give us a description like this, have it public, add a README file to this, and I will just create this repository. Okay, so now I can clone it to my computer, right? So you just go here and you copy this thing. So now what I can do is that wherever I want this repository to be, right, locally. So let's say I want it in my documents. So I will just open a terminal, right? So I'll open my terminal. I will go to the documents, right? So documents and then UCLA. So I want to have my Git repository or the folder, whatever I want it to be, inside this particular location, right? So wherever you want it, you just go to that. You just go to that particular directory in the terminal, right? And here I can just do git clone, and yeah. So now doing this, what it will do is that it will create a local folder here, right? So if I go to documents, UCLA, so Python tutorials, right? So I just got a Python tutorial folder here, right? So whatever code I make, I can just write it here. I can just save it here, and then later I can push it to Git, right? And then so it will be somewhere where you can just track code, right? So as you develop your project, then you can keep building on it, and you can yeah. So that you have a backup, and then later if you want to share your code with someone, you can just share the GitHub repo. So let's get started with now finally writing a program, right? So I open a terminal at this particular folder, and since it's a Git repo, right? So let me first just check what is the Git status, right? So if I just check Git status, so it's yeah, nothing to comment since we don't have anything new here, so it's fine. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is to create a new conda environment. So whatever I explained earlier, that all the packages that we are going to install, we'll be installing it inside this particular environment, right? So for that, we'll create a conda environment. So the way we do it is that conda create n, and now you write the environment name, right? So let's say I write tutorial, and then you can also mention the Python version that you want to have, right? So I'm just writing Python 3.11 so that I will be using Python 3.11. Okay, so just say Y for yes, and then this will have your conda environment setup, right? And whenever you want to go into this environment, so you just need to write conda activate tutorial, right? So my suggestion would be, whenever you start, just go to the terminal, start it from the folder you want to, like wherever you want to write your codes and everything, right? And there you just do it conda activate tutorial, right? So what this will do is that, so right now you see here it's written as base, so this means that you are in the base environment, right? But if you do this conda activate tutorial, so now you can see that you are inside the tutorial environment. So now what happens is that whatever thing you do, you will be doing it inside this particular tutorial environment. So all the packages that we will install and so on, so it will be happening inside this particular environment. So you can check the version of Python that we are using. So Python dash version, so it's Python 3.1 1.3, and to install all the packages, so pip install numpy, pip install pandas, and so on. So what I will do is I will install pip first, right? So conda install pip, so that I have a pip inside this environment. I can also just check pip version, right? And pip version, you can see that, yeah, it's inside my tutorial environment and that's pip, right? So now the next thing, now let's finally get started with writing a Python code, right? So the way I do it is I use Visual Studio Code, and now if I want to launch Visual Studio Code inside this particular folder, I just write code dot. Okay, this should just start the Visual Studio Code. Okay, so when you have it, the Visual Studio Code installed, so if you just write code dot, it may not work in the very beginning, because if you have to set it up here. So the way you set up your Visual Studio Code, in the beginning you can just open Visual Studio Code wherever you have downloaded it. So what you can do is you can go to the extensions, and since we want to use Python, right? So first you can check for Python in the extensions, and I have already installed it, right? So if you, in the beginning, this might not have been installed in your Visual Studio Code. So here you will just see an install. So whatever you see here install, you will see an install button here, right? So just click on it, it will install Python. And the other thing which I would like to do for you is to also install Jupyter. So Jupyter is, yeah, you'll see that when you are getting started, so I prefer, like when you are in the very beginning, you can, and just testing around with different codes. So Jupyter, you can just run a few lines of code very fast, right? So you can, so it's much easier in the beginning, and then later when you have the code set up together, then you can create the .py files, right? So you can also install Jupyter. So you'll also similarly see install here, and you can install that. And now the thing which I have shown in the beginning, that when I write code dot, that it starts the Visual Studio Code. So for that, what you can do is you can press Command Shift P. So in my Mac it is Command Shift P, but in Windows it may be Control Shift P. So just check for that. So Command Shift P. So if I do that, then you'll get this thing here. So here, as it says, like install code command in path, right? So you can, if this is not showing, then you can just search for code, right? And then you will get this. So if that code dot was not working for you, then you can just click on this install code command in path. You can just click on this, and it will, since I've already set it up in my system, so I'm not going to do it again, but you can just click on this install code command in path. So wherever in the terminal you are, if you just write code dot, then you can open your Visual Studio Code in that particular folder. Okay, so now let's finally start with our new file. Okay, so yeah, so this is the space that you see. So this, I'm just closing it for now. So this is the space, like we are inside the Python tutorial folders, right? And right now, since we don't have any files here, so that's why it's completely empty. So this README was just, since we had set it up during the GitHub repo setup thing. So this README is there. Apart from this, we don't have anything, right? So in order to, now we'll start building up our code here, right? So what we can do is, so this is for new file. So you can just click on a new file, and I will write it as, let's say, tutorial1.py, right? So this will be like a .py, so a Python file, and whatever code you write it here, and later on you can run it, right? So what I will do is, along with this, I'll also have Jupyter notebook along with this, right? So this is a .py file where you need to write this, and then you can run this particular program. So I will also have a tutorial1.ipynb file set up here. So what this does is that so this is like a shell, right? So this is a shell. You can just run the lines of code that you write here. Okay. So what you can do is, so let's say I just want to print something. So print hello world, right? And in order to run this particular cell here, we just press shift plus enter. Okay, so shift plus enter, and this showed something here because we hadn't set up the Python environment here. So you just need to select the Python environment, so tutorial, and now it says that we didn't have this package here, so it will just install it. So whatever it says, you can just follow it, right? And once it installs this particular extension inside this particular environment, so now we can run this, right? So you can see that if you go to this particular shell here, and if you just run this, then you will see it as print hello world. Okay, so let me write one more line of code here. So print I am in the Jupyter notebook. Okay, so if you run this, then you'll get it like I'm in the Jupyter notebook. So this is like where normally you can test all of the codes that you write, right? And then once you have all your codes organized, then you can write it in your .py file, right? So let's just go to the .py file here, tutorial1.py, and let's do the same thing. So I'm just writing print hello world, right? And the next line of print is that print I am in the Python file. Okay, so now this is a .py file. So these are like two lines of code that you have here. So now you can just run these line of codes, right? So the way we ran here, just with shift plus enter. So to run this, what you can do is you can either open the terminal just here, or you can just go back to your terminal, right? So here in the terminal, you are inside your particular folder. So you can just write Python and tutorial1.py, right? So if you just run this, then you get the output, hello world, I'm in the Python file. Okay, so this thing you could have also done here if you just open the terminal here, right? So if you open the terminal, so I'm just going to make this screen a bit smaller here to the left. Okay, so whatever we did there, right? So you can just do it here, right? So this is also the terminal. We are inside this particular thing, the folder, and you can just write Python tutorial1.py, right? So if you run this, then you should get the same output here. Okay, so now you see that inside this particular folder here, we have our tutorial1.py file, tutorial1.ipynb file, right? So these are the two files that we created. So now I would like to just go back to our Jupyter notebook here and just experiment with all of the codes that we write here in this particular file. Okay, so let's get started with our first concept. So these will be like very small basic concepts, and then later on we'll be bringing together all of these concepts together, and then later on go towards the more complicated ones. So the first thing is, whenever you are writing the program, so to make it more readable, so it's very difficult sometimes. So when you write a particular code, then that's quite obvious to you, but when someone else reads that code, right? So it just takes quite a while to figure out what that person was thinking. So a good way to communicate, right? So whatever you were thinking or whatever you're trying to do with that particular line of code is to write comments. Okay, so the way you write comment is that you use this hashtag, right, or pound. So you just write comment, whatever you want to write. So this is my first program, right? And you can write some more comments there, that I am printing random things. Okay, and then you can just write the code. So print, let's say, hello again, right? So what this will do is that it will just print hello again, right? And then these lines are just there as comments, so that whoever is the reader can understand what you are trying to do with these particular codes. Okay, so this is about comments, and also in .py file you can just write comments wherever you want to. So you can just write this hashtag and then printing, or you can be more exact, right? So printing hello world, right? And yeah, that's it. And then you can again, in order to run this particular program, you can either run it just from what we did earlier, or you can go to your terminal, Python tutorial 1, and then you can see it's again printing the same thing. So the comment is here just for readability, right? So if anyone else is reading your code, then they can understand what's happening. So now let's get started with different data types. Okay, so first we will start with the integers. So let me write the comment. So integers. Okay, so as you might be knowing about integers, so integers are like a 0, 1, 2, 3, so on, right? Also -1, -2, -3. So anything without the decimals, so it's just integers, so you can have the integers type. So let's say I write something as is 25, right? So this is here is a variable that is taking value 25, right? So if I run this, then we have just created a variable which is of integer type, and it has a value of 25, right? So the way you can check what is the type of a particular variable, you can just write type age, right? So if you do this, then you will get it as integer, and if you want to check what's the value of this particular variable, then you can just write that variable, enter, so you just get 25, right? So this is the first thing. Next, since you have integers, so you also have where you will need the decimal points, right? So that we call as the floating point numbers. So let's say floating point numbers, right? So in this, what you can do, oops, sorry, not so just enter. So here, let's say I do temperature is equal to whatever 40, okay, 0.5, and this I'm writing in Celsius, right? So Celsius, I hope I have written it CELSIUS or CIUS, okay, whatever it is. So degree Celsius, right? So these comments can be useful in those sense, okay? So now if you have this temperature, then if you check for the type of this, so the temperature, and also like you can just press tab in order to complete it. So now it's a float type variable, right? And if you check for its values, then it's temperature, right? So temperature is 40.5. Next, so we have integers, we have floating points, then we want something to store characters, right? So something to play around with words. So we have strings. Okay, so we have strings. So let's say I want to write some name. So name is equal to, let's say, Virat. Okay, so now if I run this, then if I check the type of this particular variable, then I get str, which is string, right? And if I want to check the value, then it is Virat. Okay, and for a particular variable, we can also reassign the value, right? So the name here was Virat, but now name, I can write it as something else. So let's say I just write it as Abhishek. Okay, so now if I check the value of name, then it will be Abhishek, right? So you can have a variable, have a particular value, and then you can reassign a particular value to that variable. So next we have something called as the Boolean. So what Boolean does is that it either stores true or false. Okay, so this will later be used like when we will come into if-else statements, for loops, and so on. So if something is true, do this, else do something else, or if something is false, do this, and so on, right? So you can use all of these different logics. So for that, the Booleans are very helpful. So let's say is underscore whatever student. So this is my variable name and I give it as true. Okay, so either it can be true or false. So now if I check the type of this particular variable, so tabs and student, so the type is boolean. Okay, and if I print the variable, so it's just true. Okay, so this is the boolean. And variables, as we've already talked about, that all of these things are different variables, right? So until now we declared like all of these different variables. So let me just go through all of it. So is name, temperature, and is underscore student, right? So these are all the variables that we use until now. So here I'm just looking at what values do they store, right? So yeah, so these are the variables that you can use. Now you can do different kinds of operations, right? So addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and so on. So let's just do a few things. So let's say result is equal to 5 plus 3. Okay, and then I'll just see what is the result. So comments here, like I am now going towards the basic operations, right? And the first one was addition. Okay, so if I just go here, then I see that 5 plus 3 should be 8 and this result is 8. Okay, and one more thing is if I check the type of this result, so what do you think? Should it be integer or should it be float? So it is integer. Since both of the numbers that we are using here are integers, so that's why the type of this result is integer. But now if I were to just do result is equal to, let's say 5.0 plus 3. So one of them is float, one of them is integer. But since one of it is float, it just automatically converts everything to float. Okay, so if you see result, so now there is a difference, right? So here you just got 8, whereas you got 8.0, right? So this was because you had float here. And now if you check the type of result, then you get it as float. Okay, so these are small things that you need to keep in mind as you go along, right? And as we are doing all of these different things, please just, if you are very new to it, these are very basics, right? So just keep doing it on your computer. So addition, simply we can do multiplication, right? So multiplication, let's say result is equal to 5 multiplied by 3. And then we get result, right? So we get 15. And again, it will be integer since we have both as integer here. So we have integer, whereas if we had done something like 5 multiplied by 3.0, so now since one is float, so it will convert everything to float. Okay. Similarly, we have division, right? So division will be again result is equal to 15 divided by 3. Now division will also give you float. Okay, so result and you'll get 5.0, right? And then this will be float. Okay, so we have addition, multiplication, division, and similarly you can also do subtraction, which is quite obvious. So just for the sake of completion, so subtraction, it will be result is equal to 5 minus 3, and if I just see result, and it, oops, sorry, so result will be 5 minus 3 and it will be 2, right? And since both of these are integers, so we'll have integer here. Now the interesting things are with what you can do with the strings, right? So strings are quite so let's say you have two different strings, right? So let's say you have a string as a hello message, right? So hello, and then you have another string or another variable which has a name, right? And then you can combine both of these things. So let's say string concatenation. Okay, and all of these codes I will push it to GitHub, so you can also check it there in the GitHub link. I will give it in the description. So let's say I have name as Abhishek, right? And you have different message, right? So you have, let's say, hello. Okay, so now what you want to do is you want to combine both of this. So name, and let's give this a different variable name, so greeting. Okay, so you want to combine both of these things into a different variable. So message, and message you want to have it as like greeting plus name, right? So, and you want to print this, right? So, oops, sorry. So print message. Okay, so what this will do is that you have this hello and you have this name, so it will just combine both of those things. Okay, so this will print as hello Abhishek, right? And you can see there is no spacing between this. So if you want to just add a space, so you can just do it like this, that you just add a new character here with space, and now if you do this, then you'll have a space here, right? So this is string concatenation. So you can do many different interesting things with strings. So the next thing is comparison operators. So right now I'm just going through, just having a look at all of these different operations that we can do in Python, and later, so these are all the bits and pieces, you know, so all these small building blocks, and then later you bring all these together and then build something more complex. So next we have the comparison operators. Okay, so the comparison operators. So in this, what you can, so first we have like the greater than. Okay, so what it does is it compares two different numbers. So let's say result 10 is greater than 5, right? So 10 is greater than 5, so this is true. So the result should be true, and result gives you true. And if you check the type of this particular variable, then this gives you as a boolean, right? So what we talked about in the beginning. So if you are comparing these two, then you can get whatever is true or false and so on. Okay, so that was greater than. We also have less than. So less than is again result is equal to, so is 5 less than 3, right? So 5 is not less than 3, so result should be false, and you get false. Okay, so I'm storing everything to this variable, but you can just do it without the variable as well. So the next thing is you can check whether these are equal, right? So what we did, first we checked whether it was greater, second we checked whether it was less, then we checked whether it is equal or not. Now we want to check whether it is equal or not. So 5 is equal to 5. So if you use both these equal to signs, then we are checking whether 5 is equal to 5 or not. So it is equal, so this should return as true. Okay, and we can also check if two numbers are not equal, right? So not equal to. So let's say I just write 5, and then not equal to is with an exclamation mark and then equal. Okay, so 5 is not equal to 5. So this is false, right? So this will give you false, right? But if you had, let's say, chosen different numbers, so 3 is not equal to 5, so obviously 3 is not equal to 5, so this should give me true, so I get true. Okay, now what you can do is, like with this boolean, you can also have boolean operations. Okay, so the if you have studied different logical operators like and or not, so what and was like, if something is true and also something else is true, then do something, right? Or if either of these two things are true, if either something is true or the other thing is true, then do something, right? And so on. So we can do those things. So let's say I have two different variables. So is raining, and is raining is true, and I have another variable is sunny, and that is false. Okay, so now first I want to have a logical AND operator, right? So what we can do is result, so is raining and is sunny, right? So here what I want to compare is, like, so this result will be true only if both of these are true, right? So if it is raining and it is sunny, then the result will be true, else it will be false, right? So here, since one is true, the other is false, so the result will be false. Is raining invalid syntax. Okay, sorry. So it will not be capital, it will be small. Okay. And this is also something which you should learn, that if you write something wrong, then you should be able to just read the error and then try to figure out what's happening, right? And you can just search it on Google. These days you also have ChatGPT, so you can also just ask ChatGPT or search on Google. Okay, so it was false. Since like one is true and the other is false, so true and false gives you false. But if both were to be true, so it's raining and it's also sunny, both are true, then we get true, right? So all of these things that you can check. Let me take it back to false. And so this was and, right? Now we also have logical or. Okay, so in or what happens is that either or, so either one of the condition or the other condition or both these conditions are true, right? So I can write result is equal to is underscore raining or is underscore sunny, right? And then print result. Okay, so if we do this, then since one is true, the other is false, so we get true, right? And then we also have something called as the logical not. So what not does is that it just reverses whatever we are doing, right? So result not is raining, right? So since the raining, like is raining is true, so not is raining, so not true will be false, right? So if you print result, then you will get false. Okay, and if you were to do is sunny, so not is sunny is false, so not is sunny. If you do this, then not false, so that will be true, right? So these are different examples that I wanted to show today. So just to summarize what we did, so we started with or before summarizing, let's do one more thing. So I have these codes written here, right? So I have these code that I wrote all these things, and now I just don't want to suddenly if something happens to my computer or something breaks down, then I lose all of this code. So right now it doesn't matter since it's just a dummy project kind of thing. But let's say if you're working on a real project, then it becomes very difficult. So now the reason that I had made the GitHub repository, right, and also if I want to share the code with all of you, then what we can do is that we can push all of this code to my GitHub repo, right? So I go to my terminal and I just check my status, right? So I'm inside this particular folder and it says like, yeah, there are these two untracked files, right? So these are two new files that I made. Then I have just to git add dot. So, and now what it will do is that I can commit whatever changes I made. So I can give a message. So just basic Python data types operations code added, right? So this is like my commit message, and now I can commit all of these changes, right? And now I can push, right? So if I push all of these things, then it will get pushed to my GitHub repo. So now if I go online and if I just refresh this, so I'm inside this Python tutorial. So now you can see that whatever code that we wrote locally, so now that has been pushed to the GitHub, and in GitHub I can see all of these code that I had written locally, right? And you can also see all these codes. So I will share this link and you can also go through all of the code that if you want to just see and try out something else, right? So this is what I normally do in my whenever I work with on a particular project, right? So just to summarize the things that we did, so we started with just installing Python, then we installed Conda, right? Then we installed Visual Studio Code, then we set up a Conda environment, then we also set up a GitHub repo, we cloned it locally, then we used Visual Studio Code to learn about these different basic data types, integer, float, strings, and what are the different operations, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and also with string concatenation, what we can do with all of these things, and also with different the boolean variable as well, and also the different comparison operators, and also the boolean operations that we did with and, or, and not. Right. So for this video, let's just keep it until here, and in the follow-up videos then we will build up on this. So later we'll go to how we can write if else, right? So if you want to do something more interesting, so let's say if it's here we have these two different variables. So if it is raining, then you want to print a certain message, right? So if it's raining and if it's sunny, then you want to print a different message, and so on. So how do you control this flow, right? So all of these conditional statements, how do you write it? And then if you want to write something in a loop, right? So if something is happening, then you can just print it for 10 times or something like that. So the for loops or the while loops, how do we use that? And here we are just writing codes in different bits, right? So if you want to put all of these together into a particular function, then how do we make that particular function, right? And then there are different types of data structures that we can have, like the list, tuples, dictionaries, sets, and so on. And then we can combine all these functions into a particular class. So how do we do all of these things, right? So these are the topics that we'll be slowly getting into the later part of the videos, into the later videos that I make. Okay, so thank you for now, and yeah, bye bye.